Hello everybody, it is I, Dr. Pacrat, and the SCP we will be reviewing today is SCP-445. Item, SCP-445. Object Class, Safe. Special Containment Procedures. Access to and testing of SCP-445 must be approved by staff with Level 2 security clearance or higher, and each request must include a list of tests to be carried out. Any testing must be done with the accompaniment of no less than 2 guards for the entirety of testing. Any deviation from the pre-approved list of tests will result in immediate termination of testing and a severe reprimand. Addendum. As of 06 SCP-445 is to be kept permanently separated from all samples of SCP-445-A, as described in Isolation Protocol IP-445-01. The access and testing regulations given above for SCP-445 apply equally to SCP-445-A. For more details, see document 44501. Description: SCP-445 consists of 3 stacks of white paper, 11 by 17 paper. Each individual leaf has the text Dr. Wondertainment Super Paper stamped on the bottom left corner. While in its natural state, SCP-445 cannot be torn or burned. Water has no adverse effect on it, and glue or tape will not stick to SCP-445. Observation of SCP-445 has found its fibers are much denser than normal paper fibers at 3,000 kgm², and a micro layer of unidentifiable subjects coated each individual fiber. When SCP-445 is folded into a representation of an object, SCP-445 takes on the qualities of the object in question. While in an unfolded state, SCP-445 can only be unfolded into its original state by the person who originally folded it. SCP-445 can also be rolled, and it will stick itself with the slightest pressure of supply. Drawing on SCP-445 does not produce any unusual effect, with the exception of any details illustrated for fold such rolled objects. A variant of SCP-445 designated SCP-445-A was created on 06-20. The exposure of SCP-445 samples to SCP-073. Physically, SCP-445 is almost identical to SCP-445, the only difference being a slight reddish tint to SCP-445-A. However, SCP-445-A behaves differently to SCP-445 when folded. See document 44501 for details. A variant of SCP-445, designated SCP-445-A, was created on 6-20. The exposure of SCP-445 samples to SCP-073. Physically, SCP-445 is almost identical to SCP-445. The only difference being a slight reddish tint to SCP-445-A. However, SCP-445-A behaves differently to SCP-445 when folded. See document 44501 for details. Addendum 10-15 Dr. Redacted Testing Log. Folded into a paper tube, when observed through one of the open ends, SCP-445 acts as a handheld telescope, enhancing the view of objects within a 25 feet distance. Folded into a Christmas tree. Remained stable when stood upright. When green and red lights were drawn onto the tree, they lit up despite the fact that there was no physical light source. Folded into a small knife. Became very sturdy and sharp, giving several researchers paper cuts when attempting to hold it. able to hold its own against actual metal weaponry. Folded into a paper tube. Acted as a megaphone, grew amplified only the folder's voice. When volume controls were on the side, the folder was able to change the volume of the megaphone. Folded into a paper cup, became very rigid and able to hold extremely hot or volatile liquids without any sign of tearing or melting. Folded into a paper crane, became animate much like SCP-368, grew though much slower and easily catchable. Recommended research into a possible connection between the two. Folded into a paper boat/hat. When placed in the water, became self-propelling at speeds up to 60 kilometers an hour. When inverted and placed on the head, the subject's attractiveness was greatly increased in the eyes of the viewer. When both were performed simultaneously, both effects were achieved with the subject looking redacted while scooting around the water, upside down. Folded into a crumpled wad of paper, data expunged, leaving 3 D-class personnel dead. Testing session ended. Folded into origami copy of 682. Animated half-acre folding process, causing Dr. G considerable energy. Testing session ended. Notes. Let's not try that again. Dr. G. Addendum. As of 06 redacted 20 redacted, Dr. S redacted has requested permission to test samples of SCP-445 in conjunction with SCP-085. He has also requested permission to expose samples of SCP-445 to SCP-073 to determine whether SCP-073's ability to destroy ordinary paper objects by touch extends to SCP-445. Document 445-01 06 redacted 20 redacted. Approval for testing SCP-445 in conjunction with SCP-073 granted. SCP-073 is placed in a room with one sheet of SCP-445 and instructed to touch the paper. SCP-445 sample exhibits no loss of structural integrity upon contact with SCP-073. However, the sample does change color, exhibiting a slightly reddish tinge with approximately 30 seconds of initial contact with SCP-073. Modified SCP-445, sample designated SCP-445-A, Dr. S. redacted, recommends further investigation into physical and chemical composition of SCP-445. SCP-445-A stored in a separate isolation chamber to prevent possible cross-contamination. 06 redacted 20 redacted. One sheet of SCP-445 is introduced to SCP-445-A. SCP-445 samples begin exhibiting visual coloration consistent with SCP-445-A within 90 seconds of initial contact. After approximately 600 seconds of contact, introduced sample of SCP-445 is physically indistinguishable from SCP-445-A. Formal isolation protocol IP-44501 established to prevent cross-contamination between SCP-445 and SCP-445-A. 07 redacted. 20 redacted. 8 sheets of SCP-445 introduced to SCP-445-A. Conversion occurs as before, bringing total number of SCP-445-A seats to 10. Dr. S. redacted begins testing on SCP-445-A, following the experimental protocol utilized on 10-15 redacted by Drs. Redacted and G. Folded into a paper tube. When observed grew one of the open ends. SCP-445 acts as a handheld telescope, enhancing the view of objects within a 25 feet distance. However, when subjects used the telescope, reported that objects viewed it seemed somehow off. When asked to elaborate, the subject was unable to specify any specific visual issue, noted that the objects viewed through the telescope appeared sinister. Folded into a Christmas tree, remained stable when stood upright. When green and red lights were drawn on the tree, they lit up despite the fact of lack of a physical light source. Test results identical to those of SCP-445. Folded into a small knife, became very sturdy and sharp, causing injuries to all subjects who attempted to pick it up, ultimately severing subject D. Redacted's right index finger at the joint. Eventually, subject using reinforced gloves was able to unfold SCP-445-A sample into its original neutral shape. Folded into a conical paper tube, acted as a megaphone, grew amplified only by the folder's voice. The amplified voice of the subject was significant distortion, exhibiting what was described as a demonic growl by the observers, though in all cases the speaker's voice was still identifiable. When a volume down control was drawn on the side, the folder was able to change the volume of the megaphone. Folded into a paper cup, became very rigid, able to hold extremely hot or volatile liquids without any sign of tearing or melting. However, samples of water added to the cup became opaque and darker red in color within 15 seconds of contact. Chemical analysis of the resulting fluid revealed it to contain large quantities of human hemoglobin and other blood proteins. No other liquids added to the cup exhibited this change, including water-based solutions in concentrators higher than 50 millimeters. Folded into a paper crane, the animal, not the machine, became animate much like SCP-368. Sample displayed aggression and territorial behavior, repeatedly dive-bombing researchers, attacking with its beak and wings, causing minor injuries. After being caught and killed by crushing the paper crane sample, was able to be unfolded into its original neutral shape. Folded into a paper boat/hat, when placed into water, became self-propelling at speeds of up to 60 kilometers an hour. Again, sample displayed aggressive behavior, repeatedly attempting to ram nearby subjects, and even propelling itself out of the water to do so. When inverted and placed on the head, the subjects began to act erratically, threatening researchers and security personnel with violence. Subject terminated. In light of these results, Dr. S. Redacted elects to suspend further testing on SCP-445-A. SCP-073 declines to comment when questioned on these findings. Note: in light of these findings, I would like to formally request that SCP-445 be reclassified as a Euclid class object. Dr. S. Well, everybody, that was SCP-445. And everyone, it has been noted that a few samples have gone missing, so be sure to check your papers carefully, especially if they have a reddish tint to them. Thank you for coming to this lecture, and I will see you all next time. Dismissed.